Okay, go ahead.
Clap your hands. Greetings to you all. My name is Benjamin Ferenz, and I'm talking to you from Delray Beach, Florida in February. Start all over again.
Okay, start again.
Okay. Greetings to you all. My name is Benjamin Ferenz, and I'm speaking to you from Delray Beach, Florida in February 2017. I want to thank the editors of the Loyola Journal of International and Comparative Law for the invitation given to me by Cameron Schlegel and Eva Freund to give you my views on the Nuremberg trials in retrospect. I'm the sole surviving prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials. Very shortly, I shall be commencing my 98th year. I got involved in the trials because I had been a soldier in World War II. In that capacity, I had been required to gather evidence for war crimes, prosecutions, by going into the concentration camps that were liberated by the American Army, of which I was, at that time, a corporal. The horrors viewed are indescribable. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington has a very good collection, permanent collection, to demonstrate the extent of those crimes. And if you haven't visited the museum, I urge you to do so. It will become unmistakable as to the scope and cruelty of the atrocities. My being an eyewitness to the crematoria while they were still going and the conditions in the camp certainly had a traumatic effect upon me, so much so that I have dedicated the remainder of my life to trying to prevent such genocides in the future. And it's from that perspective that I approached the Nuremberg trials, where in one of the 12 subsequent trials, after the International Military Tribunal was closed, I was appointed chief prosecutor for the United States in a trial against SS extermination squads. I had found the reports from the front, the Eastern Front, every day given by the commanders whose assignment was to murder. They never used the word murder, but to eliminate, which meant murder, and kill every single Jewish man, woman, and child they could lay their hands on, and do the same for the Gypsies and other potential enemies of the Reich. When I had tabulated over 1 million murders, I took samples of that file with me. I was doing the research in Berlin, and I flew to Nuremberg, where I spoke to the new man in charge of the subsequent trials, General Telford Taylor, who later became my law partner in New York. And I said, we've got to put on a new trial. He said, we cannot. The lawyers have already been assigned. The Pentagon has approved them as they are. We won't be able to get approval for a new trial. And I said, it's impossible. You can't take these mass murderers I have in my hands, mass murder on 1 million scales, and let them walk free. He said, can you do it in addition to your other responsibilities? I, of course, said, of course. And so he said, you're it. So I became the chief prosecutor for the United States in the largest murder trial in human history. I accused 22 defendants of murdering in cold blood over 1 million innocent people. The people were killed because they didn't share the race and the religion or the ideology of their executioners. I thought that was a horrible thing. But in order to lend some real significance to the trial, I felt it wouldn't be enough to just dispose of these 12 men, 22 men out of 3,000 men who did the same thing every day for about 2 years. I thought a rule of law would be important. And so I asked the court to affirm by international law the right of all human beings to live in peace and dignity regardless of their race or creed. And that, in fact, was the judgment of the court, led by Superior Court from Pennsylvania, Judge Michael Musmano, and 2 other American judges. That tradition of calling for the human rights of all human beings has remained the principal goal of everything I have done since that time. 13 of my defendants were sentenced to death. It was considered a great victory. 4 of them were actually executed, and after a few years, because of political influences or humane considerations, the rest of them were let free. So, what is the significance of the international military trial plus the 12 trials, which was designed to buttress them and make it clearer how a country like Germany, civilized, could allow such things to happen? The main step forward from the Nuremberg trials was to declare that aggression, they called it there the crime against peace, was the supreme international crime, because all the other crimes happened in time of war. And I agreed with that from my observation as a combat soldier. There has never been a war without rape. There never will be a war without rape. And if you're concerned about stopping rapes or deterring them, stop war. That's the first thing you should do also to protect other human rights. So this has been my objective. How do you stop war? Because that's what Justice Jackson, who was the chief American prosecutor at the International Military Tribunal, called for. Aggression, the court said, is a supreme international crime because all the other crimes are encompassed within that framework. Well, as you know, we have not eliminated war. And what have been the problems preventing that from happening? Nations forgot about Nuremberg and went back to killing as usual. In Vietnam, for example, Telford Taylor, who was, say, my boss at Nuremberg, my law partner later, wrote a book, Nuremberg and Vietnam. And the theme of that book was that we forgot, the United States forgot what we tried to teach the rest of the world. So it's important for you as students now to ask yourself, were the goals wrong or were the goals right? We were listed as crimes against humanity, all of those things which happen in war. And I knew from my defendants, all of whom were very well-educated men, I had selected them on the basis of their rank. I had 6 or 8 generals, and on the basis of their education, I also had the same number of PhDs. All educated, highly trained men became mass murderers in times of war, and it happens all the time. These people would never have committed such crimes had there been no war. So war itself became the target. Now, by declaring aggression to be the supreme international crime, the First General Assembly of the United Nations asked the nations to set up a new international criminal court to follow the Nuremberg trials and to create a new code of crimes which would include the supreme crime of aggression, and if there was any question about defining it, appointed committees. And they did appoint committees. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that for about 70 years, the committees were debating how do you define aggression. Well, that, my dear friends, is for the birds. The aggression had been defined by Justice Jackson, by the International Military Tribunal, by the International Law Commission, by a consensus definition of all the nations in 1974, approved by the General Assembly. And then the nations said, no, no, no. And what nations? The most powerful nations, unfortunately led by the United States, saying, oh no, if you can't define the crime, of course we can't try it. And of course we can't define it, because they came and they quibbled and they quibbled and quibbled until in Uganda, fairly recently, the last couple of years, 5 years ago, they said, okay, we'll agree on a definition of aggression. And of course it was loaded with all kinds of loopholes, because the truth of it was that the United States and the other big powers, led by Russia and China, were not willing to subject their citizens to the judgment of any foreign court. certainly which one they couldn't control. If the Security Council had to be approve the act of aggression, then they could control it because the big powers were all members, the victorious powers. So that's what caused it to be frozen. Now, how do you jump? How do you get out of that? In Kampala, they reached a definition, but it's still subject to all kinds of approvals, have not yet been met. So at the moment, the crime of aggression is in legal limbo. Nobody can be tried for that crime at this particular time in legal history. So I have suggested, take another train. If the courtroom door is locked, so the crime of aggression cannot be heard in that court, go in through the window, find another entrance, call it a crime against humanity, which it is. It certainly is. Crimes against humanity are not subject to Security Council review. They have been approved now for hundreds of years. The rights of the human beings to live in peace is a fundamental human right recognized in many, many declarations. Unfortunately, these declarations are not enforced. So a declaration without implementation is nothing more than a hope. But it does express the will of the people. So here we have a potential definition of sorts, but we don't have a court competent to deal with it because of the nature of the way the crime is described. Call it a crime against humanity, subject it to universal jurisdiction, allow any court in the world to try them. The Universal Declarations of Human Rights all protect the right to life and the fundamental human rights. The law, said Justice Jackson, as other scholars, cannot remain static. It's got to change in order to meet the needs of a changing society. The world today is more dangerous than it has ever been. I'm speaking to you as young students because you are the ones at risk. It's the old way of fighting, you know. The original Lieber Code prevented the Indians from using poison arrows in the United States. The next war is going to be fought from cyberspace. Do you know what that means? It means that today, as I sit here, I know that the United States has the capacity to cut off the electrical grid of any city on planet Earth. The Russians can do the same thing. The Chinese can do the same thing. All they have to do is throw the switch, boom, all your lights are out, the water doesn't run, the hospitals can't work, there are no trains. You're all going to be dead in a matter of weeks without a sound. Is that the world you want? I'm working very hard to try to change that. And it's very difficult because we run into a big political problem. They pretend that it's legalist because they don't want to say they're in favor of continuing the war system. It's too stupid. But it is so stupid. The current system is, if two heads of state can't agree, they send young people like you out to kill other young people like you, they don't even know, who may never have done them any harm, and they keep killing each other until they get tired of that, and then they each declare victory, and then they rest a while, then they start again. That is the current system. Not my system. I've been through that. The Pentagon gave me 5 battle stars because I wasn't killed in any of the 5 major wars of World War II. I was damned lucky, is all I can tell you. You may not be that lucky. So it's up to you. Everything on my website, which is my name, Ben Ferenc, BenFeren, C as in Charlie, Z as in zebra, is free. You can copy books, articles, DVDs, motion pictures, all of it. I don't require any credit for it. You can plagiarize all you like. You have my consent. What I want to do is to change it so you have a safer world. Now, to make it easy, since we live in a world of slogans and people are guided more by slogans and symbols than reason, my slogan is law, not war. You're lawyers. What would that mean in effect? You'd save billions of dollars every day if you could go to court instead of go to war and using all your new weapons and all the money spent on the arms race, which they have going on all the time. Billions of dollars spent every day in an arms race between nations who can kill people the most and the fastest. That's crazy. We would save money. We have it to take care of the students, student loans, of the refugees, of the poor, of the health, all the things which give rise to militant combat and hatred, and we call it terrorism for the other side. All those things would be reduced. We can't expect perfection. We'll never have perfection, but we're trying to deter the illegal use of armed force. That is what I have been doing and writing on. The illegal use of armed force, knowing that it's a violation of the UN Charter, which allows self-defense and allows armed force if the Security Council approves it. The illegal use of force, knowing that it will kill large numbers of civilians, should be condemned as an international crime and as a national crime, and it should be subject to jurisdiction in any court that can seize the criminal, the perpetrator. And on top of that, he should also be held accountable in a court of law for the expenses and the costs of trying to bring justice to them. I was involved in that. Germany did set up a big program of compensation and restitution to Nazi victims. You'll find all of that on my website. So these are principles of law and justice. You have a law review, you have a respected university, you are determined to be lawyers, have the law serve the purposes of peace and justice for all people, and you will, as I will. I am now approaching my 98th year. My first case, when I laid down these principles of humanity, I was 27 years old. It was my first case. As a sign of recognition for my efforts, when they finally did get the International Criminal Court, for which I'd been working very hard, the chief prosecutor, Marino Ocampo, invited me to come down and do the closing statements for the prosecution, which I did. I was then 92. So you see the progress. The law is spiraling upward. There has been a recognition of human rights. Humanitarian law is taught in all universities, major universities in the world. It's a difficult road to hoe, but it can be done. It is being done. With all of its faults, the courts which already now exist on a national level, International Criminal Court as well, the ad hoc courts for the Security Council, they're all defective because they're new. These are prototypes. It's a newborn babe. It's not going to get up and start running. It has to be nurtured, and it eventually become more effective, more efficient, and hopefully you'll be living under a rule of law. And so my simple slogan is law, not war. And in order to make sure that you remember that, I have an additional slogan to answer the question, how do you do that, Mr. Ferenc? Well, I give you 3 pieces of advice. 1, never give up. 2, never give up. 3, I hear the echo, never give up, coming from you. So the ball is now in your court, kids. My best of luck to you. Bye-bye. How many minutes?